Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Demon Folklorist. I am, yes, the Demon Folklorist, and today we're going to be talking about Skinwalkers. So yes, the white woman's going to tell you about Skinwalkers, but in my defense, I think my research on different spirit types, including demons, Dibukim, Jinn, and shadow people, gives me at least some credence to talk about the phenomena specifically. The folklore itself is fascinating, but it's not really my area. It's just sort of in my general wheelhouse of supernatural, so I am not claiming to be an expert on this phenomena at all. I'm just comparing it to different spirit types. I do want to note, though, as I'm recording this, I'm actually kind of having trouble with it. Almost like something doesn't want me to talk about it. So yeah, super weird. I don't know why my audio came out the way that it did. A lot of shuffling, a lot of weirdness kind of in the background. I've tried to record this several times and this is the best I could do, so sorry guys for the weirdness in the background. Who knows, maybe the Skinwalkers were listening. So what is a Skinwalker? They are from Navajo culture. They are dark magic practitioners, usually dark shaman shapeshifters that can change into animals. They call them skinwalkers because they can very literally wear the skins of animals when they shift. They travel quickly, and they can also enslave the dead, much like Bokers, which is from Haitian voodoo. It was something that was, I think, a little bit more popular maybe in the 80s, 90s. This fear of the Haitian zombie. And that's where we get the idea from zombies, right? Except this was less of the dead and more of, or even like a virus. This was more like they would maybe blow this certain kind of dust, or I don't know exactly how it's done. I need to look into that again. But basically you become a slave to them, to the Bokor, because they are able to mix a compound that takes your will away. Your mind is basically gone and you become whatever they want you to be, and it can be like that for years, which is very, very scary. But I did find it interesting that skinwalkers sort of behave like Bokers. Skinwalkers can also read minds. They control other night animals. It's said that to become one, you have to murder a close relative to initiate you, which to me sounds like a deal that is made with something for unearthly power. And then they go along the witchery way, which is what it's called. It's mostly men, but sometimes women become skinwalkers too. It's just not as often. And then doing things that go against your humanity also seem to help initiate you, like grave robbing and necrophilia, which also is a thing with demons, I might add. When you turn your back on humanity and against your own humanity, bad shit happens. So be aware. And it's said once you go down this path and you have sacrificed somebody close to you that you love, you become pure evil. And that's how you get initiated into that witchery way. Legend tells us that their eyes give them away. If they're in animal form, skinwalkers' eyes glow red. If they're in human form, their eyes look animalistic. It's said that skinwalkers are an imitation of the very powerful entity that gave them their abilities. And if you really think about it, this is a really serious cold-blooded sacrifice. And skinwalkers sound horrible enough, and they're just a pale imitation of the thing that gave them this ability. Maybe it's a demon. I mean, there's something that makes me think that later. We'll talk about that later. But I do want to say that I fully believe in skinwalkers. But to be fair, I believe in a lot of folklore. Almost all of it, actually. Even if it's not truly the thing that folklore says it is, I believe something's happening. If you heard that, that's Salem. He's jumping on my chair to see what's going on. But either way, I believe something is happening. Otherwise, these stories just wouldn't exist in the proliferation that they do. They wouldn't replicate and change, and so many people wouldn't have experiences with the exact same thing. The stories come from somewhere, and back to my original point, it seems that skinwalkers are something that comes up in specific areas time and time again. They aren't everywhere, but near Utah, the Southwest, even Mexico and Texas, something's up. I even think it's possible that the chupacabras of Mexican legend, or El Cucuy could be them, or El Cuco, they're also called. Different names, similar abilities, and this idea actually came up when I was reading a book, Vampires of El Norte by Isabella. She's a really fantastic author. If you haven't read her, go read her. The Hacienda, which was, I believe, her first book. It is one of the most accurate books I've ever read about a demonic entity. And I had told her that on Threads, and she said that she had drawn it from a story she was told from, I think, from somebody she knew. So, like, I love her books because they blend folklore and fiction really, really well. And so I kept coming back to this idea as I'm researching Skinwalkers, like right around the same time as I'm reading this book for the first time, that there's such a similarity between these things. They're a little bit different in her book, but they're similar enough because they seem to straddle the spirit world, and when you're bitten by them, they give you what is called susto, which is a type of spiritual illness. But they also walk among men in our world. So, yeah, it kept coming back to that. I also grew up in California, and I heard these stories too. So I'm examining a security guard's very weird experience with Skinwalker Ranch. First came the dreams, over and over again, of a malevolent, dark entity just standing there, staring at him. Not weird at all. And later grinning very evilly at him. And he also reported feelings of uneasiness and dread on the property. There were odd lights and orbs, is what they called them. Portals, strange creatures, and unnatural footprints, kind of like kid-sized bowling pins, but like pressed into the ground, which just sounds weird. Something that very clearly walks upright on these weird-ass feet. Tracks that kind of stop in the middle of nothing, almost as like they took flight or disappeared maybe into a portal. Another story about this area is that this guy had this thing come up to the house and scare the shit out of his animals. There was an overwhelming smell of rotting meat, and this marker makes me think that skinwalkers are emulating a demon once again. Whatever it was, it didn't pay attention to the people. It just walked on two legs until it got to the tree line, and then it went on all fours and scampered into the forest. But unlike a demon, it's merely a sense of dread instead of all-out evil. This, by definition, to me, means that they are not demons. But I do find it particularly interesting that this part spirit, part animal, part human thing, this creature, lives in both realms simultaneously. I wouldn't have thought it was possible, but these narratives tell me it's a very real thing. And the fact is, skinwalker stories are actually pretty popular. I know some of it is probably because of media attention, like the shows about Skinwalker Ranch, the research that's being done on this area, but it could also be that people didn't know what it was who lived in those surrounding areas around the ranch and in the Southwest. So they just kind of thought, like, they didn't really have a name for it, or if they did, they didn't realize it was the same thing as this Skinwalker Ranch. So that could be also why the stories are coming out and they're so big, right? But I do think that something very real is happening. So what they are, I don't know. All we know is what the Navajo have told us. So they're described as being very hairy, skinny, tall, kind of kangaroo-like with their arms, but with canine features like pointed ears and a dog-like nose. And it sounds a lot like what people think werewolves are. Anyway, the security guard also heard drums where there weren't any. He saw coyote-like things, and they would literally be kind of like beamed up into nothing. There was no other place for them to go. Other people also had this experience of like a wet dog smell whenever they'd witness these like coyote things that walked on their hind legs. And other people he was with even saw the shadow person that had begun to haunt him. So it's a very like real thing. To me, when you're having an experience with something supernatural, like my boyfriend was telling me he had this paranormal experience and he thought it was like a hallucination or an illusion. And then he told me that his brother had the same experience in the same amount of time. And I'm like, yeah, that's not an illusion or a hallucination. That's an experience. When more than one person experiences it, like, this is happening. You know, because yes, our minds do play tricks on us. Yes, the paranormal is very strange. But there is such a thing as, okay, this is not just me. This is not happening in my head because you just saw this too. You know what I mean? So I think it lends credence when we have other people to back us up. And strangely, when it came to this shadow person, the other guy said that he didn't feel any unease. He didn't really feel anything about it. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have known it was there. And that to me is a very interesting piece of phenomena. It makes me think that that shadow person is a projection of the Skinwalker. Because wouldn't you feel it if it was actually there in the room with you? Especially if it had ill intent, right? So that's what makes me think it's maybe like some kind of projection, like it's not there at all. But I'm also not sure how to explain that discrepancy because there would also be tracks sometimes leading away from the house. So hard to say how this works. And also the fact that there's overlapping. There are multiple types of shadow people, but there are multiple things using the shadow person projection when they are scouting. It seems like they're scouts. They're there to ascertain you. I've never had an experience with them, but they are so common that, yeah, I wonder if, there's just some kind of projection scout. They're trying to figure you out. Maybe figure out if you're some kind of threat. So, yeah, lots to think about. I really love working with phenomena because there are so many rabbit holes that we can go down, and it never really ends. Paranormal phenomena is never going to be explained, and I love it. This is my thing. Anyway, also something that often happens in the presence of skinwalkers is the silence bubble. This is also described in demonic narratives. Everything just becomes unnaturally silent. And this happens in shadow person narratives as well. A reminder, since I haven't really done like a shadow person episode, is that there are several different types and not all of them are bad. I would never be like, oh, they're all skinwalkers. But like I said before, some shadow people could be produced by skinwalkers. Another thing that happens is that electronics almost always go dead right around a skinwalker territory. Just dead, gone. That is completely drained. And it makes sense if you also think about demonic narratives. They are using the energy that's being produced from these electronics to manifest in our world. So it doesn't surprise me at all that this happens. What surprises me is how fast it happens. It means that they have some kind of ability to just wipe things out. And then another couple markers for skinwalkers include, once again, dead electronics, the sense of dread, the gross smell of some kind, sometimes dog-like, not always. I've also heard of sulfur being smelled, orbs right before they manifest, a deafening, unnatural silence, tall, dark figures, and it freaks out animals if they're near, which a lot of these are very similar to demons, but the difference between a skinwalker and a demon is the intensity. Demons are going to bring everything up to, on a 10-point scale, up to 20, let's be honest. Skinwalkers seem to bring things up to a high level, but they're not demons. That's very clear from the way this phenomena manifests, at least to me. But yeah, like I said, everything a skinwalker does, a demon does it times 10. So, that gross smell becomes overwhelming to the point of vomit. That sense of dread is instead a feeling of horrific evil that this thing wants to torture and kill you. Like, everything in your body tells you to run. It also tells you to run with skinwalkers, but not in the same way. People who have experienced a true demonic presence, they don't forget them, ever. But skinwalkers are much the same way. But like I said, I think skinwalkers, where they get their powers from, might be demonic because of the way it's manifested. But we'll talk about that later. Anyway, back to the story. So the security guard one night, he sees these two figures by part of the old homestead, which is said to be the most haunted part of the ranch. And I might add, I felt really weird looking at a picture of it. One of my abilities is psychometry, and I can sometimes pull information from photographs. I did not like this. This weirded me out, and it told me basically, my clairaudience told me, do not ever go near that place. It's very dangerous for people like you. So I'm assuming psychics. But anyway, immediately the security guard, he gets sick with fear, or perhaps it's the skinwalkers making him sick. He nearly pisses himself out of fear because he sees them full on and describes them just like coyotes, but somehow mixed with human and dog characteristics. He says that they were like a sickly imitation of people, but still way too dog-like. That's a direct quote. The smell was like a 3-day-old carcass rotting in the summer heat, and these creatures seemed awkward when they were moving, but still somehow very agile when they actually moved fast. He shot them both, and this did nothing. They just grinned at him as they advanced. And then when one of them rushed at him, he passed out really quickly, and he woke up super discombobulated in some kind of cave system. Everything was in this very weird amber light, and it was kind of shining like the way the halls just sort of fucked with him, and he walked further downstairs into it and saw wall art that depicted skinwalkers, some sort of inhuman godlike figure. The way it was described reminded me of Loki's bastard son in The Ritual, if you've seen that movie. And then there were these other type of zombie people that were depicted, probably being controlled by the skinwalkers. And when he walked outside of this place, there were no stars. And he wasn't hungry or thirsty, even though he had been there for quite a while, not that his watch worked. The watch had died when he had first gone into the homestead, so when the skinwalkers were around. In this underground cave system, he came to a fire where he saw little people. They were about 4 feet tall. One was dancing, one was playing a drum and chanting around a fire. There was a stone altar nearby, and it had a body on it, wrapped head to toe in something gauzy. A dark form emerged from the fire, one of pure evil, that scared him down to his bones. Now, I believe this was demonic because of the way he described it. There was a horrible smell of death that gagged him and swelled his tongue, and also just this horrific feeling of pure evil. Like, evil cannot be mistaken, although sometimes people think, like, oh, it was negative, it had to be evil, and it's like, no. Evil's a whole different thing. It is something you can feel in your cells. And also the intensity and the malice. But the little man who was dancing did some kind of gesture towards the fire. There was a bright flash, and before the dude woke up again, the body on the altar sat up. And then suddenly the dude woke up in the homestead, surrounded by other people who had already checked in there for him previously, but suddenly he appeared, poof, probably through a portal. And this was 3 days later. There were no footprints outside to indicate he had ever come near the homestead. Also, his core temperature was normal, according to a doctor, which was not normal because without shelter at that time of year, he should be dead. He should not be at a normal core temperature. Also, he'd lost serious weight because he went without food and water for 3 days. My guess is that he was taken to the spirit world, or that they call it the half-light world, and he was lost there for a little while, and it was his body on the altar that the skinwalkers were trying to sacrifice to their demon, especially from the phenomena that was presented. Nothing under the sun is like a demon's presence, so those markers stand out to me. And I can't help but wonder if the demonic, it's one of the true forms of the original werewolf, because there's been at least one case of a werewolf demon possession. So it's not too far out of the ballpark. It's like the same field. But the little people saved him. And I think that they might have been fairies. Or like whatever the North American equivalent of fairies are. Skinwalkers are also said to bind somebody with a gift or treasure, much like a fairy or incubus. And a very strange man had offered the security guard a very weird coin, but he sort of forgot about it. Didn't really covet it, just stuffed it in a drawer. But the people who are tempted by skinwalkers, they disappear after this experience. And my interpretation of this whole experience is that the skinwalkers were trying to sacrifice him to a very dark entity. And the fairies from that area were trying to help him escape. And they did. He woke up. It's a great book. It's called Lost on Skinwalker Ranch. Do I believe it? I think this world is weird. And Skinwalker Ranch is even fucking weirder than that. And it's believed by the Navajo that some places on Earth, possibly nodes if you believe in ley lines, which are crisscrossing energy lines across the Earth, when they cross it's called a node, and they are thought to be portals, maybe to different dimensions. And these places of power can be either good or evil. Another person went down the Skinwalker research path, and they found many other similarities in other countries like Germany, Poland, Russia, Ukraine, the Gobi Desert, Chile, and even the UK. And when they got to Utah, their electronics immediately went dead near the ranch as soon as they were inside the property border. A very strange scent filled the air, which smelled like burning sulfur. There were lights in the distance. The smell intensified with the red glow in the sky also intensifying. They saw something out of the corner of their eye, which made them slip, fall, and knock their own lights out. And when he awoke, it was to a very tall person standing over him that spoke to him, said he was Navajo, and that he had awoken in some kind of stone-walled room with a doorway. It sounded like it was underground, but it wasn't said outright. This Navajo person talked about the battle of good and evil that was going on, and it seemed that he might not be fully alive. But again, that's what it sounded like, it wasn't explicitly said. And that the Skinwalkers have been wreaking havoc through portals for a very long time. And also we needed to turn the land back over to the indigenous to prevent a full-on war with Skinwalkers. And I'm like, hard agree, give it back. These people know how to defend their world, you know? And also weirdly, this guy had dreamed of this place and even died in it, and so just super weird. And it makes me wonder if the dream world and the spirit world aren't as separate as we think it is, that our dreams maybe connect us to that world a little bit. For psychics, we definitely know that it does, and it's super weird. I've had like spirits try to talk to me when I'm like about to fall asleep, and I'm like, let's not. Anyway, other experiences are oddly with people's families. So like a security guard or somebody who's like working with the officials on the ranch will go to this place, but then their family, who are miles away, will start to experience phenomena. So it's just very, very odd. Now, what had happened is that this guy was working on the ranch, and a black shape appeared in his wife's home. There were footsteps in the house with no origin. Orbs were witnessed by the kids, and it seemed to know when the husband was out of town. And then her and the boys both witnessed a very large wolf man standing on its hind legs with glowing yellow eyes and long black hair. The boys actually saw it at a different time, and until she had heard their story, she thought she must have imagined this. There was evidence of a very large predator that had been out there. And some people are like, oh, well, maybe it was the dog man, said to have the body of a wolf, stance of a human, and glowing eyes. It's very elusive, and there are stories of it all over the forests of North America. These dog men, they tend to observe, but they don't really attack unless they're provoked. Hard to say if they're related to skinwalkers. They might be. Or this could be something else. But the connection with the ranch, the entire family began to fall ill with like intense flu symptoms and continuing orbs in their room. And then they would have autoimmune issues. The ranch has been tested for radiation and gamma rays, and it's found to be toxic. But what's odd is that this affected the family who had never been there instead of the man who had actually been on the ranch. So it's almost like a virus. Maybe he brought it home and they caught it, right? Something about these things attacks your immune system, which with my experience in Logan, Utah, something happened to me. And I don't fully know what it was, and I know there was some kind of entity that was very unfriendly. It wanted me to leave. It hated me being there, and I would have 7, 8 bad things happen to me a day. My luck went completely south. And I also left this area with a horrific hormonal imbalance and other types of spiritual issues that I couldn't shake even when I had left the area. And some of them were immune system issues. Like, I got sick all the time. So there's definitely overlap between all of these things. They all seem kind of interconnected with skinwalkers and shadow people and sometimes autoimmune issues. Now, I'm not saying everybody with autoimmune issues is having some type of skinwalker shadow person problem, but there might be some overlap, especially if you've ever been near the ranch or places where skinwalkers are said to be. These things are dangerous to us. I would stay the fuck away if I were you. But anyway, That's just me. If I had to guess, I would say Skinwalker Ranch is some sort of portal field that has windows to possibly the past, future, maybe just other dimensions where spiritual entities exist. It seems to be a place where good and evil war against each other in the open. A battlefield, if you will. And they have no regard for what humans can see and can't see. They just don't care. But one of these books implies that is through necromantic magic, or magic of the dead, that allows skinwalkers to do what they do. To be clear, necromancy itself is not evil. I'm friends with a necromancer, and they're one of the most compassionate people I know. That being said, how something is used is very important in magic. Intention is everything. So if the intention was to do harm, then yes, necromancy could easily be used for evil. To my understanding, like, magic is what you make of it and how you use it. So if you're not using it to hurt other people, then no, it's not dangerous. So I just wanted to make that distinction in case somebody came across these books and were like, oh my gosh, all necromancers are evil. And it's like, no, not all necromancers are evil. The Ute also believe that speaking the name of the skinwalker, like just calling it skinwalker, can draw them to you, which actually I agree with, but only if you're from an area that they are from, like anywhere nearby. Otherwise, that's a lot of distance, and though researching skinwalkers definitely creeped me out a little bit, it wasn't because one was there while I was researching this. Like, Salem had come up behind me and I didn't even realize he was there, and kind of freaked me out when he started licking his chops, and I was like, oh my god. Because I was so deep into reading someone's experience that I just forgot my cat was in the room. But I do believe that speaking things aloud can create a psychic link to them. So talking about it makes it worse. You know, something to be aware of if you're from an area that skinwalkers are said to be from. There are other supernatural UFO things that happen on the ranch, and it seems like everybody uses the portal fields much like the skinwalkers, maybe even cryptids. There was a Bigfoot-like creature that was witnessed several times, and honestly, we don't know what Bigfoot is. What if it's a spirit, right? There were seemingly prehistoric creatures, certainly things that we've never seen before. So what if it's like a window to the past? But these experiences have a different set of phenomena, so I don't view it as being part of skinwalker activities. But the weird silence bubble is also called the Oz factor, and it was nothing I had heard of because I'm not part of the UFO UAP community. So, you know, I didn't know it was called the Oz factor. But it does seem like certain types of entities, demons, skinwalkers, shadow people, and UFOs all seem to be able to use the Oz factor. So, very, very interesting in terms of phenomena. Eventually, I'm going to sit down and do abductions and sightings. Also, animal skins are used to ward off skinwalkers, possibly even to keep them fenced in off of native land, keep them boxed in near the ranch. And that's really interesting to me, that the thing that keeps them away is what they use as part of their shapeshifting. Or are there certain animals that they can't shapeshift into, right? So yeah, this is so fascinating. This is really just like sort of an introduction to skinwalker phenomena. But a lot of the stories that I've read about them and people's experiences follow the same guidelines, you know, that I had addressed earlier, the markers. And that is so fascinating to me, especially because it sort of validates my current research. So, like I told you guys, on August 17th, I'm going to be presenting in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I mean, everybody knows where Gettysburg is, but I'm going to be honest, I just knew Gettysburg and not where it was because I'm not from the East Coast. So, that's why I said it that way. So yeah, August 17th, I'll be at the Paranormal Research Symposium. If you are in the area and you're interested, I'll be talking about different spirit types and how to distinguish between different entities by their markers, because that's a major part of my research in cataloging paranormal phenomena. So yeah, stop by, say hi. I'd love to meet demon folk in the wild. I've never met somebody who didn't know me already who listened to my podcast. It'd be fun if that happened, but it's cool if you can't. There's going to be a paper published on this subject with the Paranormal Research Symposium. I'll tell you guys about that later when it comes out, so you can read my research if you can't make it to Gettysburg. But either way, all of this really validates that my research is important. And I know that, like, some of you are either like, oh yeah, your research real important, or you guys are like, yes, of course it's important if you're, followers of the podcast. Because when you're a researcher, you don't always feel like you're doing things right. Like you're wondering, am I missing something? Is this even important? Is this, something that needs to be known? I do think my research has validity because of the way that all of these different phenomena, they manifest, but they seemingly manifest in patterns over and over. The same stuff ends up happening when it's a skinwalker. But you have overlap, right, between the skinwalker and shadow people. There are shadow experiences that do not match the skinwalker at all. So it has its own set of markers, even though there's overlap. Demons and skinwalkers have overlap, even though demons have a very distinct set of markers. I've already outlined all those markers. If you're new here, my book is called The Black Hours, Modern Demonic Experiences in Folklore. You can go check it out and go see what the markers for demonic activity are, if you're interested in that. But yeah, like every time I sort of like look into a new facet of the paranormal, I keep seeing that every single one has markers. So I had gone on the Haunted History Chronicles to talk about my research, and I had done an additional article as an add-on for that. It was about the famous poltergeist case, the Enfield poltergeist case, that had happened over in London in 1977, and I believe into 1978. But even that experience definitely had really interesting similarities between demons and this phenomena, except for one thing. And it was something that stood out every single time. The phenomena was very neutral. It was not there to hurt anybody. See, what I think was happening in that case is that there were many spirits in the Enfield house that had passed through. This was very old parts of England, right? And many people had lived and died in that house and nearby. So they were all kind of still hanging out a little bit, at least a couple of them. And I believe that this poltergeist energy, which is largely thought to be PK energy. PK energy stands for psychokinesis, but when PK energy is emitting from somebody, it's often thought that possibly psychic girls who are starting to mature are emitting this energy. And what I think happened in that case is that the phenomena ended up manifesting because the girls were emitting it, but then the ghosts were using it. They were using these energies and using it almost to sort of play tricks. Although I don't even think they were using it to hurt anybody or to really play tricks. They just were using it, right? So that's what I think happened there. Anyway, long story short, basically what I'm trying to tell you is that every single time I look into a new facet of the paranormal, different markers emerge that signify that experience is unique from other ones, even though, there's always overlap, like footsteps and dark shadows and, that sort of thing. Even though there's overlap, there are also unique markers that are only found in that experience. So, yeah, I'll go more into that on August 17th in Gettysburg. Hopefully I'll see you there. If I don't, I'll let you know when the thing comes out. But yeah, love you all, demon folk. And do I know what my next episode's going to be about? I think so, but I don't want to promise anything because I've been all over the place lately. This has not been a good summer for me. I've been exhausted for half of it. I'm just getting my energy back. But I'm thinking I do an episode on Baba Yaga and the Slavic folklore that surrounds her. She's a very interesting character. But yeah, I'll see you guys later. And in the meantime, don't go near Skinwalker Ranch. I don't advise it. Okay, bye-bye.